August 12, 2023. Emily Turner stood at the edge of the dense Amazon jungle, her camera hanging loosely around her neck, capturing the last remnants of sunlight. She had come here, alone, with a mission. Not just to hike, not just to escape, but to truly capture the raw, unfiltered nature of the world through her lens. There was something in her eyes, a calm confidence, an intensity. A perfectionist, no doubt. Emily wasn't the kind to wander aimlessly into the wild. She planned every detail of her trip. No one who knew her was concerned. Emily had done this before, traveled alone, photographed the impossible. Yet, this time, things were different. Just moments before she vanished, she sent one final image to her family, a perfect shot of the jungle canopy bathed in golden light, the trees stretching toward the sky. The photo wasn't unusual, until you look closely. In the background, a faint, shadowy figure lingers just outside the frame. It's barely visible, but it's there. Watching. And that's when the first unease creeps in. The camera, a simple Nikon D750, captured everything in the frame, except for this. It's something the photo didn't mean to show. Something hidden in plain sight. What if this was no accident? What if someone or something was waiting for Emily? What was that figure? And why didn't anyone notice it until much later? No one saw the warning signs. Not then, and certainly not when she sent the message to her mother that night, a simple text, "The jungle's calling. I'm off. Talk to you soon." Nothing seemed off. But it was. As soon as she set foot into the jungle, it swallowed her whole. She disappeared without a trace. And so, the story begins, not with a disappearance, but with a question that no one could answer. What happened in those last moments? What did that shadow in the background truly mean? Before we go deeper, hit that like button, subscribe, and share this video. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Hold on, because this truth is darker than you could imagine. Emily's disappearance was an enigma. Her family, friends, and even the authorities were left in the dark. She was prepared. She was experienced. There was no reason for her to vanish. The Amazon, vast and unyielding, has claimed many before her, but they were always found. Bodies, camps, clues, anything. But Emily? Nothing. Days passed, and the search began. The dense jungle swallowed any trace she left behind. No footprints. No sign of struggle. No clues that pointed to where she had gone. Her equipment, her gear, her belongings, all left untouched in her tent. The worst part? The search teams found nothing. It was as if she had simply evaporated, swallowed by the very air she had breathed. The thick foliage, the endless canopy, it concealed all, even the most obvious signs. But it was the night she went missing that would send a chill through everyone involved. The sounds of the jungle, they're nothing like the peaceful solitude hikers expect. It's alive with noise, but it also hides something else. Emily had set up camp in a sheltered grove, a small clearing between towering trees. She had planned everything carefully. Yet, that night, there were no signs of life. The nearby wildlife, typically chirping or rustling in the underbrush, had gone eerily silent. And the strangest thing of all? Her satellite phone, the one she was supposed to use for check-ins, was left behind, untouched. No distress signal. No cryptic last message. The only indication that something was wrong came from her camera, capturing more than just the jungle. It captured the last moment she would ever be seen. Days turned into weeks, and the search intensified. Yet Emily remained elusive, hidden from sight. No tracks. No clues. Nothing to explain how someone so meticulous could simply vanish. But the truth was more horrifying than anyone could have imagined. A missing hiker wasn't the story here. It was something far darker, far more disturbing. The jungle doesn't let go of its secrets, it holds them tight. And Emily's disappearance was only the beginning. Something was waiting for her. The moment the call came in, Mark Turner's world shattered. His daughter, Emily, was missing. It didn't make sense. She was an experienced hiker, methodical in every step, prepared for every challenge the Amazon could throw at her. This wasn't like her. But the jungle is unforgiving, and what didn't make sense soon turned into a nightmare. 4 days, Mark waited for news, holding on to hope like a lifeline, But as the search stretched on, that hope began to fray. The longer Emily remained missing, the more the truth crept in. Something had gone horribly wrong. A father's instincts can't be ignored, and Mark felt the gnawing certainty that something darker was at play. Determined to find his daughter, Mark left everything behind. He drove from his quiet home to the jungle, the weight of grief pulling at him, but also fueling him. With each step deeper into the wilderness, he couldn't escape the eerie stillness that hung in the air. Every rustling leaf, every whispering wind, felt like a clue, but no matter how hard he searched, he found nothing. The jungle remained an impenetrable fortress, guarding its secrets with fierce loyalty. Mark refused to believe his daughter had simply vanished. She wasn't the type to be careless. There had to be an explanation. He pored over the maps, tracing every route, every point where she might have gone. It wasn't just about finding her anymore. It was about bringing her home, even if that meant uncovering a truth he wasn't ready to hear. The deeper he ventured into the Amazon, the more he began to notice the oddities. The strange footprints, faint but unmistakable. The way the trees seemed to close in on him, pushing him forward, further into the heart of the jungle. Was it the jungle playing tricks on his mind? Or was it something else guiding him, forcing him to confront something he wasn't prepared to face? Mark wasn't the only one searching, but his search was different. It wasn't just a father's love driving him forward, it was a growing sense of dread, a realization that his daughter had uncovered something she should not have. And whatever it was, it had consumed her. By the time Mark arrived in the jungle, the official search was already in full swing. Rangers, helicopters, and teams of trackers spread out across the vast, uncharted terrain, hoping to find some clue, any trace that could lead them to Emily. The Amazon jungle, with its twisted vines and dense underbrush, is a living labyrinth. It swallows the unwary, devours those who enter without a clear path. And for the first few days, it seemed like Emily had simply been swallowed whole. The search parties scoured the area near her last known location, a small clearing just outside a winding trail. The dense foliage had hidden her trail from even the most experienced trackers. No footprints. No gear. No signs of struggle. The jungle mocked their efforts, its silence deafening. What made the situation even more perplexing was Emily's equipment. Her tent had been pitched perfectly, her backpack and supplies neatly arranged, as though she had planned to return, yet never did. The campsite was intact, untouched by any sign of chaos. It was as if she had just vanished into thin air. But it was the oddities that kept surfacing, the details that didn't quite add up. The air felt too still, as though the jungle itself was holding its breath. The searchers felt it too, an unnatural tension, a creeping unease that made every movement feel wrong. The jungle wasn't just hiding Emily, it was guarding something. On the fourth day of the search, the first breakthrough came. A local guide, a man named Lewis, approached the search teams with an eerie piece of information. He claimed that the jungle held secrets far darker than anyone could imagine. According to Lewis, there were places deep within the Amazon that even the indigenous people feared to tread. It was an ancient part of the jungle, untouched by time, where the spirits of those lost to the jungle were said to reside. Lewis spoke in hushed tones, as though merely uttering the words would invoke some curse. He described how hikers, explorers, and adventurers over the years had disappeared without a trace, never to be seen again. Could it be possible that Emily had wandered into such a place? The idea of lost spirits, curses, and ancient rituals seemed far-fetched, yet the growing sense of unease among the searchers hinted at something more than just an unfortunate accident. Was the Amazon really just a jungle, or was it something far more sinister? Something that hid its dead, its secrets, and its forgotten past. Emily had always been meticulous, methodical, precise. So why, then, had she left behind such a bizarre set of circumstances? It was the one question that haunted the investigation. Her behavior, in the days leading up to her disappearance, seemed perfectly normal. In fact, it was too normal, so calm, so measured, that it felt almost rehearsed. Her last communication was a simple message to her mother, telling her everything was fine and that she'd send another check-in soon. No mention of any trouble, no hint of fear or concern. Just the promise of more beautiful shots, more exploration. But it was the way she said it, the tone in her voice, that unnerved those who spoke to her afterward. There was something too controlled, too neutral, almost as if she had no idea what she was truly walking into. Emily's friends later recalled a curious conversation she had before leaving. A few days before her hike, she had mentioned feeling an overwhelming sense of dread. It wasn't anxiety, she wasn't nervous about the trek or the challenge. No, it was something more unsettling. A sense that something was wrong, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. She even laughed about it afterward, calling it just a weird gut feeling. But now, looking back, it seemed like a warning. Could it have been a sign of her intuition warning her about what was lurking in the jungle? Something she couldn't fully comprehend at the time? A disturbing thought emerged. What if Emily had known something that the rest of the world didn't? Had she stumbled upon something, or someone, in the jungle that changed everything? Something that made her feel so uneasy that she tried to push it aside, not wanting to admit it to herself, or anyone else. The truth was, Emily's behavior before she left didn't just seem off, it seemed too perfect. Almost as if it had been scripted, like she had been playing a part in a larger, hidden narrative. And that's when the chilling realization struck. What if this wasn't just an accident? What if Emily had been led into something darker, something she didn't fully understand? And if that was the case, what had she really seen? What had she uncovered that forced her into the heart of the Amazon? Days into the search, a new lead emerged. A man, a hiker, seen near Emily's last known location. His presence was noted by a couple who had encountered him while they were trekking the same trails. The couple, Gerald and Eleanor, had been tourists from Ohio, on a leisurely hike through the jungle. They remembered him clearly, a man in his late 30s or early 40s, walking alone. His pack was military-grade, heavy and worn, and his expression was anything but friendly. He made no eye contact, barely acknowledged them as they passed, and simply kept his eyes fixed straight ahead. Strange behavior, considering the jungle was not a place for isolation, especially not without some kind of interaction. Tourists, guides, and even locals all spoke to one another out of necessity or curiosity. But this man? He was different. He walked past them as if they weren't even there, as though he was on a mission. But what mission? And why did he seem so detached? The couple's description was vague, but it became a focal point in the investigation. A forensic sketch artist was brought in, working to piece together the face of this stranger, who soon became known as the Silent Hiker. His features were sharp, almost gaunt. His eyes, sunken and unreadable, seemed to pierce through everything. The more authorities learned about him, the more unsettling the case became. Why had this man been in the jungle at the same time as Emily? Was he connected to her disappearance? Was he simply an observer? Or had he been stalking her? The authorities couldn't find anything concrete, no name, no known connection to the area, and no history of criminal activity. But the mere existence of this man, someone whose presence seemed so out of place, raised more questions than answers. He became a ghost haunting the investigation. No one knew if he had crossed paths with Emily or if their meeting had been merely coincidental. And if they had encountered each other, was it a chance encounter, or had it been something much more orchestrated? Something sinister? In the midst of the search, the focus shifted. This man, this shadow, was now a prime suspect. Who was he? What did he know? And why had he disappeared as quickly as he had come? The more they dug into his presence, the more the case began to unravel into something far more complex, far darker, than a simple disappearance. The jungle was not only hiding Emily, it was hiding its secrets, secrets that someone didn't want uncovered. The deeper the search teams went into the jungle, the more oppressive the silence became. The Amazon, known for its buzzing wildlife and the cacophony of sounds at all hours, felt eerily still. The rustling of the trees, the chirping of insects, even the distant growls of predatory animals, it was all absent. It was as though the jungle itself was holding its breath, watching, waiting. The air was thick with humidity, but it wasn't just the physical weight of the jungle that pressed down on the searchers. It was a sense of something watching them. An invisible presence, lingering just beyond the edge of their awareness. Even the most experienced guides and trackers felt it, a constant, gnawing feeling that the jungle wasn't just a place of nature, but a place that held darker forces. Emily's last known location had been in a remote part of the Amazon, far from any well-trodden paths or tourist routes. The searchers followed the narrow, barely visible trails, the dense undergrowth parting reluctantly as they moved forward. But the deeper they ventured, the more difficult it became to shake the feeling that something, or someone, was leading them into the heart of the unknown. Days turned into weeks, and still, there were no answers. Emily's gear remained untouched at her campsite, yet she had simply disappeared into thin air. But it wasn't just the disappearance that troubled the team. It was the growing sense that they weren't alone in the jungle. Strange footprints, half hidden in the mud, seemed to lead nowhere. Broken branches pointed in unnatural directions, as if someone, or something, had intentionally altered the landscape to throw them off. As night fell, the jungle became even more unnerving. The shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally long, and the night air grew thick with a strange tension. Every snap of a twig, every gust of wind, felt like a warning. The search teams had no idea what they were truly up against. The jungle wasn't just an obstacle, it was something far more elusive, something that toyed with them, teased them, led them further into its tangled depths. And with each passing day, the jungle's silence grew more oppressive. What was it hiding? What ancient secrets lay buried beneath its layers of vines and trees? The searchers didn't know, but they were being pulled deeper into a truth they could not yet comprehend. The longer the search continued, the more the whispers grew. It started with the locals, those who had lived on the outskirts of the jungle for generations. They spoke in hushed tones, barely above a whisper, when asked about Emily's disappearance. It wasn't the typical fear of wildlife or the threat of getting lost. No, it was something far older, far darker. The jungle keeps its secrets, one of the elders told the investigators. It doesn't let you go once it has claimed you. Not easily. The words had an air of finality to them, as though the jungle itself was a living entity, and once someone crossed into its depths, they would never return, or at least, not unchanged. The locals spoke of legends, of places deep within the Amazon that no outsider had ever seen and lived to tell about. There were tales of ancient rituals performed by tribes long forgotten by history, rituals that bound their souls to the jungle, that made them part of it, never to escape. Some said it was the spirits of the jungle that led wanderers astray, guiding them deeper into its embrace until they lost all sense of time and place. Others claimed the jungle itself had a life force, one that fed on those who entered without respect for its boundaries. As the search teams pressed on, they began to encounter signs of something unsettling, strange symbols carved into trees, remnants of old fires with ashes that seemed far older than the recent search. It was as though the jungle held the imprint of something ancient, something forgotten. A presence that had never fully left. At night, strange sounds echoed through the trees. The sounds were too low, too faint, to be traced to any identifiable source. They were whispers, sometimes laughter, sometimes chanting. The searchers, once confident and determined, began to feel a creeping unease. It wasn't just the missing woman that haunted them now. It was the growing sense that the jungle was alive in ways they couldn't understand, and it was toying with them. Each night, as the darkness pressed in and the shadows grew deeper, the searchers grew more reluctant to continue. The closer they got to uncovering the truth, the more they realized they were not just searching for a missing person. They were searching for something that had been buried long ago, something that the jungle had been hiding for centuries. And it was watching them. It was the faintest of clues that broke through the impenetrable veil of the jungle's silence. 3 weeks into the search, a helicopter crew, scanning from the skies for any signs of movement, spotted something. At first, it seemed like a trick of the light, a glimmering reflection on the jungle floor. But as they descended lower, it became clear they had found something. Hidden beneath the dense canopy, in a secluded part of the jungle no one had previously explored, the team discovered what appeared to be a makeshift camp, one that didn't belong. It was small, crude, and nestled in a narrow ravine, shielded from the elements. The surrounding foliage had been carefully cleared, and remnants of a fire pit lay scattered across the ground. But there was something off about it. The fire had long gone cold, but the area had been disturbed, trampled as if something large had moved through recently. The most disturbing part? Among the scattered belongings, a single item stood out: Emily's camera, half buried beneath a pile of leaves. The camera, covered in dirt and debris, was untouched, the lens cracked, but it was still intact. Whoever had been there clearly hadn't cared about hiding it. The realization hit the team like a freight train. Emily had been here. This was her campsite, though it was far off the path she had planned to follow. A search of the area revealed more anomalies. Emily's pack, a sturdy hiking bag that contained most of her essential gear, was missing. But there were traces, a torn piece of cloth caught on a branch, some freshly broken branches, as though someone had hurriedly pushed through, trying to make their way deeper into the jungle. The team's initial excitement at the discovery quickly morphed into dread. They had found her, or at least, they had found where she had been. But why had she left this place in such a hurry? And more disturbingly, why was the camp so far off her planned route? Had she stumbled upon something she wasn't meant to see? Something that had led her deeper into the jungle, into the heart of darkness? The answers were just out of reach. But the discovery was a turning point. It was no longer just a missing person case. It was a puzzle, a mystery locked in the jungle's embrace. And whatever had happened to Emily, whatever force had taken her, was now being exposed. But would they be able to uncover it before the jungle swallowed all traces of the truth? The discovery of Emily's camera was just the beginning. It was the key to unlocking a door that, once opened, revealed more horrors than the searchers had ever anticipated. The camp they found, hidden in a ravine deep within the jungle, was more than just an abandoned site. It was a chilling reflection of the danger that had been lurking just beneath the surface all along. The site was meticulously arranged, as if someone had been watching, waiting, and knew exactly how to keep things hidden. The fire pit, though cold and abandoned, showed signs of recent use, an oddity in an area that had been untouched by the official search teams. The charred remains of a small fire weren't the only thing that raised alarm. Emily's belongings, spread out with disturbing carelessness, seemed to mock the precision of her usual organization. A jacket was draped over a nearby tree, as if hastily discarded. A water bottle sat half-closed by a rock, half-empty. But why? It made no sense. This wasn't Emily. She wouldn't leave her gear like this, scattered carelessly in the middle of the jungle. Then, the searchers found something far more unsettling, a series of strange symbols carved into the trees around the camp. The markings were primitive, old, and unfamiliar, the kind that no one in the search team could identify. They were etched deep into the bark, as if scratched by something or someone with purpose, a language that didn't belong in the Amazon. The symbols, crude and jagged, seemed to form a pattern, one that suggested a ritualistic nature. The air felt different in that clearing, heavier, charged with an energy that made every step feel like an intrusion. The oppressive silence of the jungle pressed in closer as the team combed the area. The more they searched, the more they felt the presence of something just out of reach, something they weren't meant to find. Emily's backpack was still missing. But the presence of the symbols, combined with the unsettling scene they had uncovered, suggested that she had stumbled upon something ancient, something deeply connected to the jungle's hidden history. Whatever had drawn her into the depths, it wasn't a random occurrence. It was planned. And as much as the search team wanted to dismiss the idea of ancient rituals and lost tribes, they couldn't deny the pattern, a pattern that led them straight into the heart of the Amazon's dark secrets. The jungle had claimed its prey. But now, it was pulling them closer, revealing its truths only in fragments, one horrifying piece at a time. The camera was the one piece of Emily's gear that had not been discarded, not been lost in the rush to leave the camp. It was a small beacon of her existence in the heart of the jungle, still capable of capturing the truth, or at least a part of it. When the search team brought the camera back to their base, they reviewed the images with a mix of urgency and dread, hoping for any clue, any hint of what had happened to Emily. The first few photos were typical of what anyone would expect from a seasoned hiker and photographer: shots of the lush, green canopy, wide-angle shots of the river winding through the jungle, close-ups of colorful insects and vibrant flowers. But as they flipped through the photos, something stood out. There was one image, taken just hours before her last communication, that sent a shiver down everyone's spine. It was a picture of a clearing in the jungle, the sunlight filtering through the trees, casting long shadows across the ground. At first glance, it seemed normal. But when they zoomed in, they saw it, a figure in the background, half hidden behind a tree, watching Emily. It was barely visible, the outline almost ghostly, but unmistakable. The figure wasn't standing casually, but crouched low, as if waiting, observing, tracking her every movement. The hairs on the back of their necks stood up. Who was this? Was it the strange hiker seen by the couple? Or someone else entirely? Whoever this was, they were clearly watching her. And the unsettling thought settled in, was Emily aware of this person? Had she even realized she was being followed? The photograph seemed to capture more than just a moment in time. It held a secret, one that Emily may have never realized she was part of. Something was happening here, something beyond a simple hike, something far more sinister than anyone had anticipated. This was no ordinary disappearance. The camera, once a tool to document her journey, had now become a grim record of something far darker. The jungle had its own secrets, and Emily had unknowingly uncovered them. But the question remained, did she realize the danger? And what happened to her after that photograph was taken? Emily's last image had uncovered something crucial. But it had only raised more questions, pushing the search into even darker, more mysterious realms. The search for Emily had brought the team deeper into the jungle than anyone had anticipated, but nothing had prepared them for what they found next. It wasn't just the symbols, or the strange figure in the photograph, or the missing equipment that kept the searchers up at night. No, it was the discovery of a village. An abandoned village, long forgotten by time, hidden in the heart of the jungle. It was Louis, the local guide, who first mentioned it. He had heard whispers of such places, but no one had ever dared to confirm their existence. The jungle was vast, and many of its secrets lay buried under centuries of growth. But now, it seemed, Emily's journey had led her straight to it. The village, when found, was eerily intact. The structures, though worn by time and overgrown with vines, stood tall, as if waiting for the return of their inhabitants. It was as if the village had been frozen in time, untouched by modern civilization. The buildings were crude, constructed from stone and wood, with walls marked by strange carvings similar to those found near Emily's camp. The air was thick with decay, but there was something more, an oppressive weight, as though the village itself were alive, watching, waiting. The villagers, if they had ever existed, were nowhere to be found. The only evidence of their presence was in the structures they had left behind. Each home was empty, each space abandoned with no explanation. But as the team combed through the village, they began to notice something that sent a chill through their spines, remnants of rituals, strange artifacts, and items that suggested a long-lost belief system. There were masks carved from bone, dried plants arranged in patterns, and remnants of fire pits used in rituals. And then, the most disturbing discovery of all. Inside one of the huts, a small, weathered chest was uncovered. It contained personal items, not Emily's, but items belonging to someone else entirely. An old photograph, torn and faded, of a woman with dark eyes staring into the camera. A pendant, made of bone, with a strange symbol carved into it, the same symbols they had found in the jungle and around the camp. The discovery of the village was a game-changer. It wasn't just the jungle hiding its secrets, it was the village and its hidden past that held the key. The connection to Emily's disappearance was now undeniable. She had wandered into a place that had been forgotten by history, a place where ancient forces still lingered, waiting to claim the unwary. But who were these people? What had they believed? And why had Emily's path led her here, to this forsaken place? As the search team delved deeper into the village's history, they realized that what they were up against was more than just an ancient mystery. It was something far more alive, far more dangerous, than they could ever have imagined. The more the team uncovered in the village, the clearer it became, Emily had stumbled upon something far darker than they could have ever prepared for. This was no ordinary disappearance, it was part of something ancient, something that had been buried in the jungle for centuries, just waiting for the right person to uncover it. The artifacts they found in the village spoke of rituals that seemed designed not just for worship, but for binding souls to the jungle itself. There were bone carvings, twisted and gnarled, resembling faces contorted in agony. Dried plants arranged in complex patterns, possibly used in some form of trance-inducing ceremony. And most disturbingly, there were remnants of human remains, fragments of bones, old and yellowed, scattered in the corners of the village huts. The further the search team dug into the village's history, the more unsettling the truth became. This place, isolated from the rest of the world, had been the site of ancient rituals. Tribes, lost to time, had performed rites to the jungle gods, to spirits that once held dominion over life and death. The rituals were said to bind the souls of the living to the land, ensuring the jungle would never be forgotten, that its secrets would always remain. And here was Emily, unknowingly crossing paths with these rituals. The camera she carried, the symbols she had captured in her photo, all of it led back here, to this forsaken village. The more they learned, the more it became clear, Emily hadn't just gotten lost. She had been drawn here, called by something she didn't understand. It wasn't just the jungle that had claimed her. It was the spirits, the forces hidden in the earth, in the trees, in the very fabric of this cursed land. She had wandered into a place where the veil between the living and the dead was thin, where ancient forces still held sway over those foolish enough to enter. As the search team sifted through the ruins of the village, they found more pieces of a disturbing puzzle. A small, intricate wooden idol, depicting a figure with hollow eyes and outstretched arms, a figure that looked almost human, but not quite. A bundle of what appeared to be ceremonial clothing, faded and threadbare, yet still emitting an unsettling presence. And most chilling of all, a journal, old and tattered, with entries in a language that no one could decipher, but the drawings inside were unmistakable. Figures in ceremonial garb, standing in a circle, chanting, and at the center, a figure that looked like Emily. The realization hit like a slap to the face. Emily hadn't just discovered this village. She had been marked for something. She had unknowingly stepped into the middle of a ritual, a pattern that had been repeating for centuries. And now, like all those before her, she was part of it. As the days in the jungle turned into weeks, the deeper the search team delved into the mystery of Emily's disappearance, the more they uncovered an unsettling pattern of symbols that seemed to appear with unnerving regularity. These strange carvings, etched into trees and rocks near the village, became the key to understanding the force that had taken Emily. The symbols were unlike anything the searchers had ever seen. They were not the simple markings of a lost tribe or primitive drawings. No, these were intricate, deliberate designs, patterns that seemed to shift when looked at for too long. The symbols appeared to be alive, pulsating with an energy that was felt, not just seen. Each symbol held a power that radiated from the very earth beneath them. The symbols were found everywhere, on the walls of the abandoned huts, on the trees surrounding Emily's campsite, and carved into the very rocks of the ravine. The carvings didn't follow any known language or system. They weren't just abstract designs, they were messages, ancient and cryptic. The team was desperate to understand what they meant, but no one could decipher the meaning behind them. One evening, as the search team gathered around their campfire, trying to make sense of the findings, a local elder approached them. He was a man named Tarek, who had lived on the outskirts of the jungle for his entire life. He had heard whispers of these symbols, of the old ritual, of the forces that controlled the jungle, and of the beings that had lived here long before the current inhabitants. Tarek spoke cautiously, as though merely speaking of it could bring the jungle's wrath down upon them. "These markings," he said in a low voice, "they are not just symbols. They are seals, bindings. They keep something in, and they keep something out. But those who walk the jungle, they don't always follow the path. Sometimes, they stumble into the places where the seals have been broken." The words were chilling, but they made sense. Emily had wandered off the path, followed an invisible pull, and found herself in the heart of this ancient mystery. The jungle had called to her, as it had to those before her. And when it had, she had entered a realm where the very land, the very symbols, kept watch. The jungle didn't forget, and it didn't forgive. The search team couldn't ignore the implications of Tarek's words. They had uncovered only the surface of a much larger puzzle. These symbols weren't just decorative. They were ancient warnings, ancient barriers. But who or what were they keeping contained? And why was Emily's path so intertwined with them? Each symbol was a key, but what they unlocked was something far darker than anyone had prepared for. Whatever force had been locked away in the jungle, it had waited for centuries. And now, it was waking up. Days stretched into weeks, and the search for Emily seemed to be leading nowhere. The dense canopy of the Amazon jungle swallowed every trace, every clue. The deeper the search teams went, the more oppressive the silence grew, And the more they realized they were not just fighting the jungle, they were fighting something far older, far darker. But then, a breakthrough came from the sky. A helicopter, tasked with another aerial search, made its way over a remote section of the jungle. It was routine. They had scanned the same areas countless times. The jungle, vast and untamed, had proven nearly impossible to navigate, let alone find someone hidden in its depths. But this time, something caught the eye of the pilot, something unusual, something out of place. The pilot's heart raced as he circled back for a closer look. Below, nestled between two jagged ridges, was a clearing. A small grove of trees stood in the middle, the shadows stretching long beneath the setting sun. But it wasn't the trees that stood out. It was the faint glimmer of metal, something reflective in the dimming light. The helicopter descended, its rotors beating against the stillness, stirring up dust and leaves as they neared the ground. Below, the pilot and his spotter could make out what appeared to be discarded equipment, a small cluster of personal items. Emily's belongings. The camera, a torn hiking boot, a single water bottle. The items were scattered like a trail, leading toward a much larger, deeper mystery. The team on the ground was alerted, and they moved quickly, knowing this could be their last chance to find any trace of Emily. The clearing was no ordinary space, it was an area of strange significance. The searchers were certain they hadn't seen it before, yet the terrain was eerily familiar. This was where the symbols had been, where Emily's trail had gone cold. It was as if the jungle had laid a trap, drawing them back to the same spot, repeating its cycles of deception. The discovery of Emily's belongings in the clearing sent a ripple of shock through the team. Her items were there, but they didn't answer the question of where Emily was. The silence of the jungle seemed louder than ever now, echoing with an unanswered cry. Had she been here? Or had she been drawn into something else entirely, something deeper, something hidden? The helicopter crew began to circle once again, scanning the area from above, their eyes searching for any sign, any clue that could lead them to Emily. They had found pieces of her journey, but not her. It was as though the jungle had swallowed her whole and left behind only fragments. It became clear, the Amazon jungle wasn't just hiding Emily. It was hiding something far more sinister, and the deeper they searched, the more they realized they were no longer just searching for a missing hiker. They were uncovering the jungle's darkest secret, a secret that had been waiting for the right moment, the right person, to awaken. With the helicopter discovery fresh on their minds, the search team continued to comb the area with renewed urgency. Emily's belongings had been found, but there were still so many questions, and they were becoming harder to ignore. The items found in the clearing weren't just abandoned, they were carefully placed, scattered in a way that suggested Emily had been part of something she couldn't control, something far beyond her understanding. As the searchers sifted through the items, the unsettling truth began to take shape. Emily's camera had captured the images of the symbols and the shadowy figure, but there was more. Hidden among the photographs was a shot Emily had taken of a strange stone tablet, half buried in the jungle floor. The symbols carved into its surface were similar to those found near her campsite, but the tablet was much older, weathered by time. And though it had been nearly impossible to read the text on the tablet, the symbols were unmistakable. They matched exactly the patterns found on the trees and rocks throughout the village. The presence of the tablet was a revelation. It wasn't just a relic, it was a key that opened the door to something much more horrifying. The stone tablet was not just an artifact of a forgotten tribe, it was part of a system, a ritualistic binding that had been used for centuries to keep the jungle's secrets locked away. And Emily had unknowingly stumbled upon it. Her last image, the photograph with the shadowy figure, wasn't just an eerie coincidence. The figure, it seemed, had been guarding the very site that contained the key to this dark ritual. Had Emily seen it? Had she realized the danger, or had she been drawn in, unaware of what she was unleashing? It was becoming clear that Emily's disappearance wasn't a random event. It was the culmination of a pattern, one that stretched back centuries. The jungle had claimed others before her, and now it had claimed her as well. The more the team uncovered, the more they realized the truth was slipping through their fingers. They were tangled in a web of ancient rituals, dark forces, and symbols that held power over those who ventured too close. But the most chilling thought of all was this: Emily was not just a victim. She was part of something much larger, something that had been waiting for her. And now, the jungle had its hold on her. As the search team pieced together the evidence, a terrifying realization began to form. Emily had unknowingly become entangled in something ancient, something far beyond anything they could have ever imagined. The symbols, the hidden village, the camera images, all pointed to one disturbing conclusion. The jungle had claimed Emily as part of a ritual far older than anyone had anticipated. The journal, found buried deep in the village ruins, had been Emily's final clue. Though it was written in an indecipherable language, the sketches inside were enough to unravel the truth. The drawings depicted a series of rituals, one that involved a person becoming part of the jungle, bound to it for eternity. The figures in the journal were not just ceremonial participants, they were sacrifices. They were lost souls, taken by the jungle, never to return. As the team examined the journal further, they found one final sketch, one that stopped them in their tracks. It was a drawing of a figure, a woman, standing before the stone tablet. And at her feet, the shadows of the jungle seemed to curl around her, pulling her into the earth, into the roots, into the very fabric of the jungle itself. The figure in the drawing had Emily's features. Her eyes were filled with fear, but also with something else, understanding. It became clear that Emily had been drawn to the tablet, to the village, and to the ancient ritual. She had stumbled upon it unwittingly, but once she had seen the stone, once she had witnessed the ritual's power, it was too late. The jungle had recognized her, and it had claimed her as part of its cycle. It wasn't a disappearance, it was a transformation. The search team, though horrified by the implications, had no idea how to stop it. The ritual had been set in motion long ago, and it seemed that only the jungle could decide when it was time for a soul to become part of its eternal cycle. Emily's fate was now sealed. She was no longer just a missing hiker, she was another lost soul absorbed by the jungle's dark, living power. The searchers felt helpless as they stood in the clearing, the weight of the jungle pressing down on them. The symbols carved into the trees, the remnants of the rituals, they weren't just warnings. They were the jungle's claim on those who dared to enter. And Emily had dared. She had uncovered the jungle's secrets, and now it was taking her. The search team realized, too late, that they had been searching for a ghost. Emily had already become part of the jungle, a permanent presence in its vast, dark expanse. And the jungle had claimed her, just as it had claimed so many others before her. The jungle had always held its secrets close. But now, as the search team stood at the edge of Emily's fate, the truth was clear, far darker and far more insidious than they could have ever imagined. Emily had become part of the jungle, her soul entwined with the land, lost to its ancient power. The rituals they had uncovered, the symbols, the hidden village, it was all part of a larger, much older cycle. And the jungle, with its unyielding grasp, had no intention of letting her go. But as the team prepared to leave the clearing, a final discovery stopped them cold. A small bundle was found, tucked away beneath a pile of leaves. It wasn't Emily's, but the moment they touched it, they could feel the same chilling presence that had been haunting the entire investigation. Inside, there were old photographs, weathered and faded. They showed a different time, a different era. A time when the jungle's rituals had been in full force, when outsiders had been drawn in, marked, and swallowed by the land. Among the photographs was one that sent a shock through the team. It was a portrait of a woman, standing alone in the same clearing, surrounded by dense jungle. Her face was blurry, but the eyes, they were unmistakable. They were Emily's eyes. The photograph was dated long before Emily had arrived in the Amazon, long before her disappearance. It was then that the horrific truth became impossible to ignore. Emily was not the first to be chosen by the jungle. She was part of a much older pattern. The jungle had claimed others before her, and it would continue to do so. She had unknowingly stepped into a cycle that had been repeating for centuries, a cycle where souls were taken, bound, and left to linger in the jungle's grasp. The realization was clear and devastating. Emily's disappearance was not a random event. It was part of something much bigger, something far more disturbing. The jungle had been waiting, watching, for someone to cross its path. And Emily had been the one it chose. As the search team left the clearing, they could feel the jungle's watchful eyes on them. The feeling of being followed, of being observed, never fully left. They had uncovered its darkest secrets, but the jungle had claimed its due. And it wasn't finished. It had only begun.